Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to explore something we all crave a little more of? I'm talking about happiness, that elusive thing we're all searching for.
It really is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, what actually leads to a happier life?
It's a question for the ages, right? And to help us unpack it today, we're diving deep into, well, 50 journal prompts for those seeking happiness. It's by Stallion, and don't worry, it's not some long, boring lecture.
Yeah, it's actually a really engaging online article. Instead of just telling you what to do, it gives you these actionable prompts, little thought starters to get you reflecting on your own happiness.
Exactly. And we're going to unpack some of the most interesting ones today. Hopefully, it'll spark some ha moments for you along the way.
And you know what I find so powerful about journaling? It's that act of actually writing things down that can unlock these incredible self-discoveries.
I'm with you 100%. So, as we go through these prompts, I really encourage you to think about how they resonate with you personally. What can they reveal about your unique path to happiness?
Because there's no one-size-fits-all approach, right?
Absolutely not. And speaking of finding what works, this first section, it's called Unearthing Everyday Joys. Which, I don't know about you, but I think we could all use a little more joy in our lives, especially those small, everyday moments we tend to overlook.
Oh, I completely agree. It's so easy to get swept up in the busyness of life, isn't it? But the research is clear. Actively noticing and appreciating those little sparks of joy, it can actually rewire our brains toward more positivity.
It's like building a muscle, right? The more we use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly.
So how do we actually exercise that happiness muscle? Well, the article jumps right in with prompt number 1. What made you smile today? And I have to admit, such a simple question, but it really got me thinking, do we actually take the time to acknowledge those little bursts of joy?
It's so true. We often let them pass us by without really savoring them.
Mm.
But each one, no matter how small or fleeting, it's like a deposit in our happiness bank account.
I love that analogy. And speaking of deposits, prompt number 3 really resonated with me. What are small things that bring you joy? They even encourage you to make a list, kind of like a,
A happiness toolkit.
yes, I think
It's like
that's
having this arsenal of little things you can turn to for a mood boost. And, there's actually a scientific reason why this works. It helps combat something called hedonic adaptation. That's just a
Yeah.
fancy way of saying we get used to the good things in life.
Oh, hedonic adaptation, tell me about it. That new car smell fades. That amazing meal becomes a memory.
Exactly. But by consciously acknowledging these small joys, by having them on a list we can revisit, we keep them potent. We remind ourselves of all the good stuff.
And it doesn't have to be just material things, right? I mean,
Yeah.
some of the other prompts are about happy memories, things you love to do, even the power of music.
Absolutely. Music is incredibly powerful for regulating our moods. And, all of these prompts, they tie into one of my favorite quotes from the article. It says, happiness grows when shared.
Oh, I like that. So it's not just about finding our own happiness, but recognizing that connection with others, that's a key ingredient too, which leads us perfectly into our next section. The happiness of connection. Makes sense, right? We're social creatures at our core. Relationships, they're just a fundamental part of the human experience.
It's like it's wired into our DNA.
Mhm.
I mean, think about it. For most of human history, being part of a group, that was essential for survival.
It's true. If you weren't part of the group, you probably weren't going to make it.
Exactly. And that primal need for connection, it's still such a driving force in our lives today.
So it's not just about feeling good, it's about feeling connected, belonging. And this next section really digs into how those relationships impact our happiness, starting with prompt number 11. It asks, how do your friends contribute to your happiness? It's like taking inventory of your social circle. Who are the people you surround yourself with, and how do they actually make you feel?
Such an important question. Are your friends a source of support, of laughter, shared adventures, or do they tend to bring you down more often than not?
It's amazing how much of an impact our social circles have on our overall well-being, right?
It's huge.
Yeah.
And another thing that really struck me in this section is that it's not just about receiving support, but about giving it too.
Oh, absolutely.
Prompt 16 really highlights this. It asks, how do acts of kindness impact your mood?
The helper's high. It's real.
It is. Studies show that when we're kind to others, our brains release all these endorphins, those feel-good chemicals. But it's more than just a chemical reaction, right?
Totally. There's this deeper sense of purpose, of connection that comes from lending a helping hand.
It's like that ripple effect.
Yeah.
You throw some kindness out there, and it just spreads. And the article touches on so many facets of this, like appreciating loved ones, nurturing those bonds, Even just writing a simple thank you note.
All those small gestures that can make a big difference.
They really do.
Yeah.
And, as we go through life, with all its ups and downs, that quote we mentioned earlier becomes even more relevant. Seek joy in what you have.
Because even amidst challenges, right, finding joy in our relationships, in those connections, it can be such a powerful buffer against negativity.
Right.
And that's where this next section really spoke to me. It's called Happiness Challenges. Because let's face it, life isn't always sunshine and rainbows.
It's true. We all face obstacles, setbacks. It's inevitable.
Exactly. But it's how we deal with those challenges, right? How we respond to adversity that really shapes our experience of happiness.
Couldn't agree more. It's about cultivating that resilience, that ability to bounce back from setbacks and come out even stronger.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? Because it's easier said than done, right?
Well, the article talks a lot about the importance of reframing those negative thoughts. It's about shifting our perspective.
Ah, yes. And that's where prompt 21 really jumped out at me. What obstacles do you face in seeking happiness? It's like taking a step back and honestly assessing those internal and external barriers that might be holding us back, wouldn't you say?
It's so important to be honest with ourselves, right? Because once we identify those obstacles, then we can start to dismantle them, or at least figure out ways to navigate around them more effectively.
And sometimes it's about recognizing we have more power than we think. Like prompt 23, this one really resonated. Write about a time when you turned a bad day around. It's a good reminder that we're not just passive bystanders in our own lives. We actually have agency.
We do. We have the power to shift our perspective even in small ways, and it can make a world of difference.
So true. And speaking of perspective, prompt 28 really hit home for me. It asks, what can you forgive yourself for today? Oh, man, that one's powerful. It's so easy to get stuck in that cycle of self-blame.
It is, but holding on to that guilt and regret, it just keeps us stuck. Learning to forgive ourselves, that's crucial for moving forward.
Absolutely. And this whole section with its prompts about dealing with stress, letting go of grudges, taming our worries, it's like a crash course in emotional resilience.
It really is. And it highlights something really important. Creating a happier life isn't about waiting for everything to be perfect. It's about equipping ourselves with the tools to find joy, even when things are messy.
Love that. Okay, so we've talked about finding joy in everyday moments, we've talked about the importance of connection, and we've talked about building resilience. Which brings us to our final section, and this is where I start to get really excited. This is where we move from reflection to action.
Exactly. It's about taking all these insights and actually applying them to our lives.
This section is called Designing Your Happiness Blueprint. It's about creating a life that truly lights us up. And one of the first things that came to mind for me was getting back in touch with those things that make us feel alive. Those passions we might have put on the back burner.
Yes, it's so easy to lose sight of those things when we get caught up in the day-to-day.
It really is, which is why I love Prompt 31. What hobbies make you lose track of time? Those activities where you get so absorbed you totally forget about everything else.
Ah, that feeling of flow,
Yeah.
right? It's like a superpower. And you know what? When we're in that state of flow, happiness just seems to follow naturally.
Totally. And speaking of getting into that flow state, Prompt 33 is all about intentionality. It asks, what does your ideal day look like? I love this one because it encourages us to not just daydream, but to actually define what we want our lives to look like.
And that act of envisioning, it's so powerful. When we create that clear picture in our minds, it's like giving our subconscious a target to aim for.
It's like creating a roadmap to happiness and then actually following it. Okay, and this next one, it brings us full circle, back to the power of journaling. Prompt 41. What have you learned about yourself from journaling about happiness? It's about taking all those insights, all those aha moments, and weaving them into a deeper understanding of ourselves.
It's amazing what we can learn about ourselves when we just take the time to listen, right? And the best part, self-discovery. It's not a destination, it's a journey.
I love that. So as we wrap up our deep dive into these 50 journal prompts, I'm curious to hear your final thoughts. What are some key takeaways for our listeners?
It's been such a rich conversation, but if I had to distill it down, I'd say this. Happiness isn't something that just happens to us. It's an ongoing practice, a choice we make each and every day. And these prompts, they're like little tools we can use to cultivate more joy, more connection, more resilience in our lives.
It all starts with that first step, right? Maybe it's picking one of these prompts and reflecting on it for a few minutes today. Or maybe it's simply making a conscious effort to notice those little sparks of joy that are already present in our lives.
Exactly. Because happiness, it's not some far-off destination.
Mhm.
It's right here, right now,
Yeah.
waiting to be discovered.
So well said. It's been a pleasure diving into these prompts with you today. Until next time, everyone, happy journaling and keep those happiness muscles working.